They dressed her in her sister's wedding gown, shoved a contract into her shaking hands, and locked the carriage door from the outside. Roslyn had 3 hours to accept that her life had just been sold to a monster. 3 hours to memorize her sister's name, because that's who the vampire king was expecting. 3 hours to become someone else, or die trying. The carriage wheels creaked against the frozen ground, each rotation pulling Roslyn closer to a fate meant for someone else. She pressed her palm against the cold window, watching her breath fog the glass. The burgundy dress they'd forced her into hung loose at the shoulders. It had been tailored for Vivian's perfect frame, not her smaller one. Even now, wearing her sister's cast-offs, she felt like an apology no one wanted to hear. Her father hadn't even looked at her when he'd shoved the signed contract into her hands that morning. "Your sister has fallen ill. You'll take her place. The Vampire King expects a bride tonight. Do not embarrass this family more than you already have by existing." 23 years of being invisible, and now she was suddenly visible for all the wrong reasons. A substitute. A stand-in. A lamb dressed in borrowed finery, sent to a monster's table. The forest thickened around the carriage, ancient trees twisting toward the sky like gnarled fingers. Somewhere in these woods, the Vampire King ruled from his estate, a creature who'd negotiated a bride from her family in exchange for protection and wealth. Political arrangement. Transaction. She was cargo now, nothing more. Roslyn closed her eyes and tried not to think about Vivian's relief when their mother had announced the substitution. Her beautiful sister hadn't even pretended to be grateful. She'd simply smiled, touched her perfectly curled hair, and returned to her needlepoint. The carriage lurched to a stop. Across the border between human settlements and vampire territory, Dimitri stood on the balcony of his estate, a crystal glass of blood wine balanced between his fingers. The night air carried the scent of approaching horses, cheap perfume, and fear. Another bride, he thought, swirling the dark liquid. Another father selling another daughter for protection they don't deserve. He'd ruled these territories for 3 centuries. Built an empire on fear and precision. Protected the few humans worthy of protection and destroyed those who weren't. His reputation preceded him, the Vampire King who'd once torn apart an entire bloodline for betraying his sister. Who'd waited 60 years to destroy a man who'd insulted his late mother. Who never, ever forgot a debt or a slight. And who desperately needed an heir to solidify the treaties that kept his people from war. Hence the bride. The arrangement. The political necessity that tasted like ash in his mouth. Dimitri drained his glass and descended the marble stairs. Time to meet whatever terrified girl they'd sent him this time. He'd be kind, he supposed. Gentle enough. Make the arrangement bearable. He'd perfected the art of distant civility over the centuries. The doors to his great hall opened, and his steward entered, looking uncommonly nervous. "Well, she's here, my lord. But there's been a substitution." Dimitri's eyes flashed dark. A substitution? The intended bride fell ill. The family sent another daughter. He felt the familiar cold rage building. An insult. A slight. They'd sent him a replacement like he was ordering furniture, not negotiating a treaty. His fangs elongated slightly as he moved toward the entrance hall. "Bring her in," he said, his voice soft and deadly. Let's see what they thought was acceptable to send in place of what was promised. He'd make them regret this. Perhaps he'd void the entire treaty. Let their pathetic settlement fend for itself against the rogue vampires in the mountains. Better yet, he'd send the girl back with a message carved into. The doors opened. Roslyn stepped into the entrance hall, and Dimitri's entire world tilted on its axis. She was small, trembling, drowning in a dress clearly meant for someone else. Her dark hair had been hastily pinned, already falling loose around her face. She kept her eyes down, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Everything about her screamed sacrifice. Offering. Lamb to slaughter. But her scent. Dimitri inhaled and felt 300 years of emptiness suddenly flood with recognition. Honey and old books and summer rainstorms. Something in his ancient blood roared to life, a connection he'd stopped believing in centuries ago. She raised her eyes then, just for a moment. Amber brown and filled with terrified resignation. She wasn't here because she wanted to be. She was here because no one had given her a choice. And in that single glance, Dimitri fell completely, irrevocably, eternally. The rage vanished. The calculated political distance evaporated. Every carefully constructed wall he'd built around his heart for 3 centuries crumbled to dust. She opened her mouth to speak, probably some rehearsed apology, some plea for mercy. He moved with vampire speed, crossing the marble floor in a blur, stopping just close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Her breath caught. Her pulse jumped at her throat, and he could hear her heart hammering like a trapped bird. Dimitri smiled slowly, letting her see the predator, the king, the immortal who'd just made the most important decision of his endless life. "What's your name, love?" His voice came out softer than he'd intended, touched with something that might have been wonder. "Roslyn," she whispered. Her voice shook but didn't break. "I'm sorry. I know I'm not what you were promised. I know I'm not." "You're everything," he interrupted quietly. "And you're mine. Forever. If you'll have me." The great hall fell absolutely silent. His entire household staff, gathered to witness the new bride's arrival, stood frozen in shock. No one had ever heard their brutal king speak with such unguarded emotion. Roslyn stared at him like he'd spoken a language she didn't understand. I don't understand. You haven't even." Dimitri reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he brushed a fallen strand of hair behind her ear with a gentleness that contradicted every story ever told about him. "I've waited 300 years for you," he said simply. "I didn't know it until this moment, but I've been waiting. And now that you're here, I will never let you go." A single tear slid down Roslyn's cheek. Not from fear this time. From something else entirely. Something that felt dangerously like hope. "Now listen closely, because I'm about to ask you a question, and I need you to answer honestly," Dimitri continued, his thumb catching that tear. "Do you want to be here? Not what your family wants. Not duty or obligation. You. Do you want this?" She should say no. She should run. But something in his dark eyes made her feel seen for the first time in her entire invisible life. "I don't know what I want," she admitted. "No one's ever asked me before." Dimitri's smile turned almost sad. "Then we'll figure it out together. But you should know, I've already decided. You're my queen. My forever. And I protect what's mine with absolutely no mercy." He turned to address the room, his voice shifting to the commanding tone that had made kingdoms tremble. "Let it be known throughout every territory I rule, this woman is Roslyn, my chosen bride and your future queen. Anyone who disrespects her, frightens her, or makes her feel anything less than treasured will answer to me personally. And you all know I'm exceptionally creative with my punishments." Then he looked back at Roslyn, and his voice gentled again. "You must be exhausted. Let me show you to your chambers. We'll talk more tomorrow, after you've rested. No pressure. No demands. Just stay. Please." It wasn't a command. It was a request. From a king who clearly never requested anything. Roslyn nodded slowly, unable to form words around the impossible thing blooming in her chest. As Dimitri offered his arm and led her toward the grand staircase, she glanced back once at the massive doors she'd entered through. She'd walked in as a substitute, a replacement, a throwaway daughter. But the way the Vampire King looked at her made her feel like the only woman in the world. Maybe, for the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible after all. Before we continue this story, I need you to do something for me. I spent hours crafting this tale to give you the escape you deserve, to make you feel something real. If you're even a little bit hooked right now, wondering what happens between Roslyn and Dimitri, don't just vanish like a ghost. Hit that subscribe button and join the fastest growing vampire love stories community on YouTube. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from because I genuinely want to know where in the world you're falling in love with these characters. Are you Team Dimitri already, or do you think Roslyn should run? Let me know below. The chambers they gave Roslyn were larger than her entire family home. Silk curtains draped floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked moonlit gardens. A fire crackled in a marble hearth. Fresh flowers, how had they managed fresh flowers in winter, perfumed the air. She stood in the center of the room, still wearing her sister's ill-fitting dress, and waited for the catch. The cruelty. The monster behind the gentle words. It never came. Instead, a soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. A maid entered, carrying a tray of warm tea and honeyed bread. His Majesty asked me to bring this personally, the young woman said, her eyes kind. He also wanted me to tell you that the seamstress will arrive at dawn. He said, and these are his exact words, that you deserve gowns made for you. Not hand-me-downs from someone who didn't appreciate what they had. Roslyn's throat tightened. He noticed. The dress. The way it didn't fit. He noticed, and instead of mocking her, he'd already moved to fix it. She sank onto the edge of the massive bed, her hands trembling around the warm teacup. Why is he being kind to me? The maid paused at the door. Because, my lady, in 300 years of serving him, I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looked at you tonight. Like you were the answer to a question he'd forgotten he was asking. The door closed softly. Roslyn stared into the fire, something dangerous and hopeful cracking open inside her chest. She'd been prepared for a monster. She hadn't been prepared for this. Downstairs, Dimitri stood before the blazing hearth in his study, one hand braced against the mantel, his mind consumed entirely by amber-brown eyes and a trembling voice that had whispered her own name like an apology. Roslyn. He said it aloud, letting it roll across his tongue. It tasted like fate. Like finally. His steward, Henrik, cleared his throat from the doorway. My lord, the contract specified Vivian Ashford. If you accept the substitute, the family could claim breach of terms. They could. Dimitri laughed, low and dangerous. They could what, Henrik? Challenge me? They sent me a replacement bride like I was ordering a horse, and you think I'm concerned about their legal maneuvering? He turned, and his eyes had gone dark with barely contained fury. Let me be perfectly clear. That family will answer for this insult. Not today. Perhaps not this year. But I have eternity, and I never forget. However, his expression shifted, something softer breaking through the rage. The girl upstairs is innocent in their scheming. She's not a pawn to be punished. She's a gift they accidentally gave me while trying to commit an offense. And I intend to keep her. Henrik nodded slowly. And if she doesn't want to stay? Dimitri's jaw tightened. Then I'll let her go. And I'll burn her family's legacy to ash for forcing her into this position in the first place. Either way, someone pays. The only question is whether I'm building a future or avenging one. He moved toward the window, staring up at the light glowing from Roslyn's chambers. "But I don't think she'll leave," he murmured. "I think, for the first time in her life, someone's about to show her what it means to be chosen. And I intend to be that someone." Morning light filtered through Roslyn's windows, and with it came reality crashing back. She'd spent the night dreaming of dark eyes and gentle touches, and she hated herself for it. "This isn't real," she told her reflection as maids bustled around her, taking measurements for new gowns. "He doesn't know you. He can't possibly want you. There's a trick here. There's always a trick." She'd learned that lesson well. Every time her mother had shown her a moment of warmth, it had been followed by weeks of coldness. Every time her father had acknowledged her existence, it had been to compare her unfavorably to Vivian. Love was a trap. Kindness was a prelude to cruelty. The Vampire King was no different. He couldn't be. When Dimitri requested her presence for breakfast, Roslyn steeled herself. She would be polite, distant. She would not let herself hope. She found him in a sunlit dining room, enchanted windows, a servant explained, allowing daylight without the burn. He stood as she entered, pulling out her chair himself, and she saw the flicker of hurt when she flinched away from his hand. "You're afraid of me," he said quietly, not a question. "I'm afraid of everyone," she admitted before she could stop herself. Dimitri sat across from her, leaving deliberate space between them. "Then I'll earn your trust. However long it takes. I'm rather patient when something matters." Roslyn studied her plate. "Why do I matter? You don't know me." He leaned back, a hint of his characteristic smirk playing at his lips. "Love, I've lived 3 centuries. I've met thousands of people. Killed a fair number of them, if I'm being honest. I know within seconds whether someone is worth my time. And you?" He held her gaze. "You're worth eternity." She shook her head. "You're saying what you think I want to hear. Actually, I'm saying what I want you to hear. There's a difference." His humor faded into something raw. "I'm not a good man, Roslyn. I've done terrible things, and I'll do terrible things again. But I have never lied about my intentions. When I tell you I've chosen you, I mean it with every dead beat of my heart." Roslyn felt tears threatening and blinked them back furiously. "I don't know how to believe you." "Then don't." "Not yet." Dimitri stood, moving toward the door. He paused with his hand on the frame. "Just, don't run. Give me a chance to prove it. 1 week. If after 7 days you still want to leave, I'll personally escort you anywhere in the world you want to go. No conditions. No revenge on your family, well, less revenge. I'll still be mildly petty. It's part of my charm." A surprised laugh escaped her, and his entire face transformed at the sound. "There it is," he said softly. "That's what I'm fighting for. 1 week, Roslyn. That's all I'm asking." She nodded before she could overthink it. And just like that, she'd given a monster 7 days to make her fall in love. The first 3 days passed in a strange dance of distance and discovery. Dimitri gave Roslyn space, but he was always nearby. Reading in the library when she wandered in looking for books. Walking the gardens when she needed fresh air. Never pushing. Never demanding. Simply present, like a shadow she couldn't shake and wasn't entirely sure she wanted to. On the 4th day, everything changed. Roslyn woke to shouting. She rushed to her window and saw riders approaching the estate, their horses foaming, their faces pale with terror. By the time she dressed and descended the stairs, the great hall had transformed into a war room. Vampires she didn't recognize surrounded a massive table covered in maps. And at the center stood Dimitri, his earlier gentleness replaced by something cold and commanding. "Rogue vampires," he was saying. "They've attacked the southern villages. 40 dead. They're moving toward the eastern settlements." Someone in the crowd murmured, "The Ashford territory is east. Should we warn them?" Dimitri's eyes found Roslyn in the doorway. Something complicated passed across his face. "We protect all humans under our treaties, even the ones who don't deserve it." He turned back to the maps. "Henrik, send riders. Reinforce the borders. And bring me the head of whoever leads these rogues. I want to have a conversation with it." Despite the horror of the situation, Roslyn felt something shift in her chest. He was terrifying, yes. But he was terrifying in defense of innocence. Of her family, who had treated her like garbage. The chaos lasted for hours. Roslyn found herself helping where she could, bringing water to exhausted messengers and bandaging wounds of injured scouts. She wasn't useless here. For the first time, she was part of something. As night fell, Dimitri found her in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, helping the cook prepare food for the soldiers. "You should rest," he said from the doorway. "So should you." He smiled, exhaustion evident in the lines around his eyes. "Touché. Your family," Roslyn said carefully. "You're protecting them. Even after what they did to me." Dimitri moved closer, leaning against the counter beside her. "I'm protecting the innocent people in that territory. Your parents and sister can rot for all I care. But there are children there. Farmers. People who had nothing to do with how you were treated." He reached out, tucking a flour-dusted strand of hair behind her ear. "Besides," he added quietly, "destroying them would hurt you. And I find I'm rather invested in your happiness. You barely know me. I know you spent all day helping strangers without being asked. I know you haven't complained once despite being thrown into chaos. I know you laugh when you're nervous and bite your lip when you're thinking hard about something." He tilted her chin up gently. "I know you're extraordinary, Roslyn. I suspect you're the only one who doesn't see it." She should pull away. She should remember that trust was dangerous. Instead, she leaned into his touch, just slightly. Dimitri's breath caught. "Progress," he murmured, his thumb tracing her jawline. "Slow, beautiful progress." A messenger burst in, shattering the moment. "My lord, we've captured one of the rogues. He's asking to speak with you. Says he has information about who sent them." Dimitri's expression went ice cold. "Sent them?" "He claims the attacks weren't random. They were paid for." Roslyn watched the gentleman from seconds ago disappear entirely. In his place stood the vampire king who made empires tremble. "Then let's have a chat," Dimitri said, his voice silk over steel. "I do so enjoy conversations where someone has something to lose." He glanced back at Roslyn. "Stay here. Some things you shouldn't see." She nodded, understanding. The monster was necessary sometimes. That didn't mean she had to watch him work. Hours passed. Roslyn couldn't sleep, so she wandered the estate's hallways, eventually finding herself in a gallery she hadn't discovered before. Portraits lined the walls. Centuries of faces staring down at her. And in the center, the largest painting of all, a beautiful woman with Dimitri's dark eyes, holding an infant in her arms. "My mother." Roslyn spun. Dimitri stood in the doorway, blood on his hands, weariness in his bones. But his eyes were fixed on the portrait with an expression of profound grief. "She was human," he continued, moving to stand beside Roslyn. "My father turned her after I was born. She never wanted immortality, but she accepted it because she loved him. She spent 300 years being gentle in a world that rewarded cruelty. What happened to her? Hunters. Dimitri's voice went flat. They came for my father, but she stepped in front of him. Took the stake meant for his heart. She died protecting someone she loved. It's the Thornwood way, apparently. Roslyn's chest ached. I'm sorry. It was 200 years ago. Some would say I should have moved on. He laughed bitterly. But I remember every face of every hunter involved. Their children are dead. Their grandchildren are dead. Their entire bloodline is extinct. Because I don't forgive, Roslyn. I don't forget. When someone hurts what's mine, I make it my eternal mission to ensure they regret it. He finally looked at her, and she saw the warning beneath the words. That's who I am. That's the monster you're considering trusting. I will be gentle with you until my last breath. But I will be merciless to anyone who isn't. Roslyn should have been terrified. Instead, she felt something unexpected, safety. This creature, this ancient being of violence and vengeance, was telling her that she would be protected with that same terrifying intensity. My family, she said slowly. They treated me like I was nothing. Like I was a mistake they couldn't undo. I know. His jaw tightened. The rogue we captured? He talked. Eventually. Who sent them? Dimitri was quiet for a long moment. Your father. He hired the rogues to attack the eastern settlements. He thought if there was enough chaos, he could renegotiate the treaty. Get Vivian out of the marriage entirely. Keep his precious favorite daughter home. Roslyn felt the floor tilt beneath her. Her father had orchestrated attacks that killed 40 people. All to get Vivian out of a marriage that Roslyn had already taken her place in. She was never coming here, Roslyn whispered. They never intended to honor the contract at all. I was just buying time. You were a sacrifice they thought wouldn't be missed. Dimitri's voice dripped with cold fury. They were wrong. And they will pay. Not tonight. Not quickly. But they will pay for every tear you've ever cried because of them. Roslyn should defend her family. Should beg for mercy on their behalf. Instead, she looked at this ancient monster who saw her, truly saw her, and said something she'd never said before. Good. Now let me ask you something, and I want you to really think about this. If someone you loved betrayed you this deeply, could you forgive them? Or would you want them to face the consequences of their cruelty? Tell me in the comments. I want to know what you would do. The days that followed were the strangest of Roslyn's life. And somehow, the happiest. With the rogue threat neutralized and her father's betrayal exposed, Dimitri had sent formal notice to the Ashford family. The treaty was void. They would receive no protection from the vampire territories. And their crimes would be addressed at a time of his choosing. But within the estate walls, something soft and unexpected was blooming. Dimitri taught Roslyn to dance in the great hall, spinning her across the marble floor while humming off-key. You're terrible at this, she laughed as he stepped on her foot for the third time. I'm 300 years old and I've conquered kingdoms, love. I think I can manage a waltz. Evidence suggests otherwise. He dipped her dramatically, his grin boyish and bright. Slander. Absolute slander. I'll have you executed for this. You wouldn't dare. His smile softened, his face inches from hers. No. I wouldn't. I rather enjoy having you around to insult me. He pulled her upright, but didn't let go. They stood in the center of the empty hall, swaying slowly to music only they could hear. "Tell me something real," Roslyn whispered. "Something you've never told anyone." Dimitri was quiet for a long moment. "I'm afraid," he finally admitted. "Constantly. That everyone I love will leave or be taken. That I'm too broken to deserve happiness. That one day you'll see the full truth of what I am and run." Roslyn reached up, cupping his face in her hands. "I see you. The monster and the man. And I'm still here." His eyes glistened with something he'd probably deny later. "You have no idea what those words mean to me." "Then show me." Dimitri leaned down slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. When she didn't, he kissed her with 300 years of loneliness poured into a single moment of connection. It felt like coming home. That night, they sat together on the balcony outside Roslyn's chambers, wrapped in furs against the cold, watching stars wheel overhead. "I never thought I could have this," Roslyn admitted, her head resting on his shoulder. "Peace. Someone who wanted me around." Dimitri pressed a kiss to her hair. "Get used to it. I plan to want you around for eternity. If you'll let me." She smiled, something cracked and healing in her chest. "Ask me again at the end of the week. Tomorrow is day 7. "I know." "And?" Roslyn tilted her face up to meet his eyes. "And I think you already know my answer." The kiss that followed tasted like forever. But forever, as Roslyn would learn, was fragile. And some storms arrive without warning. Day 7 dawned gray and ominous. Roslyn woke alone in her chambers, which wasn't unusual. Dimitri often had early meetings with his council. She dressed in one of her new gowns, deep emerald silk that made her feel like the queen he kept calling her, and descended for breakfast. She found chaos instead. The great hall was packed with vampires she didn't recognize. At the center stood a woman so beautiful she seemed carved from moonlight. Silver hair cascaded down her back. Ice blue eyes surveyed the room with predatory grace. And she was holding Dimitri's hand. Roslyn froze in the doorway. "Ah," the woman purred, her gaze finding Roslyn immediately. "This must be the little human everyone's been whispering about. The replacement bride. Valeria." Dimitri's voice carried warning. "That's enough." But the woman, Valeria, only smiled wider. She glided toward Roslyn with supernatural grace, circling her like a shark scenting blood. "Pretty enough, I suppose. If you like the fragile type." She leaned close, her voice dropping to a whisper meant only for Roslyn. "Did he tell you about us, little human? About the centuries we spent together? The wars we fought side by side? The bed we shared for 100 years? Roslyn's blood turned to ice. "He didn't, did he?" Valeria laughed, the sound like breaking crystal. "Poor thing. You thought you were special. But you're just the latest distraction. He gets bored, you see. Finds a new toy. Plays with it until the novelty wears off. And then..." "Valeria, enough." Dimitri was suddenly between them, his expression thunderous. "You were not invited here. I don't need an invitation. I heard you'd taken a human bride and I simply had to see for myself." Valeria's smile turned cruel. "Tell her the truth, Dimitri. Tell her that a week ago, you were still planning to honor the original contract. To marry the beautiful sister and use this one as a servant, maybe, or a blood source. Tell her what you said about Ashford daughters being interchangeable." Roslyn felt the floor dropping away beneath her. "That's not true. He wouldn't." She looked at Dimitri and saw the guilt flash across his face before he could hide it. "Roslyn." His voice was strained. Let me explain. Is it true? Her voice came out as a whisper. Before you met me, were you planning? I didn't know you existed. His words tumbled out desperately. All I knew was the contract. A bride from the Ashford family. I didn't care which one because I didn't expect to care about any of them. It was politics, Roslyn. It was. So I was interchangeable. Just like they always told me. No. Listen to me. Roslyn stepped backward. I need air. I need. She turned and fled, his voice calling after her, her heart shattering with every step. She'd been a fool. Of course she had. A man like him, a king, a creature of centuries, couldn't truly want someone like her. It had been a game. A novelty. And she'd fallen for it completely. In the great hall, Dimitri whirled on Valeria with murderous rage. You will regret this, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't care how many centuries we spent together. I don't care what we once meant to each other. You just hurt the only person in this world I would burn kingdoms for. And I will make you suffer for it. Valeria's smirk faltered. Dimitri. Get out. His fangs extended, his eyes going black. Get out before I forget that I once loved you. Because right now, all I feel is the need to watch you bleed. She left. Wisely. But the damage was done. And somewhere in the frozen gardens, Roslyn sat on a stone bench, tears freezing on her cheeks, convinced that she'd been a fool to believe anyone could truly choose her. Hours passed. The cold seeped through Roslyn's gown, but she couldn't make herself move. The garden had become her hiding place, a frozen sanctuary where she could pretend her heart wasn't breaking. She heard him before she saw him. Footsteps crunching on frost. The heavy fall of a coat being draped around her shoulders. The warmth of his body as he sat beside her on the stone bench, leaving space between them. You should go inside, Dimitri said quietly. You'll freeze. Maybe I want to freeze. He flinched like she'd struck him. I deserve that. Yes. You do. Silence stretched between them, thick and painful. I won't insult you with excuses, Dimitri finally said. Before you walked through those doors, you were a name on a contract. A political arrangement. I didn't expect to feel anything because I haven't felt anything in centuries. His voice cracked. But then you looked at me with those amber eyes, and I felt everything all at once. Fear. Hope. Recognition. Love. It terrified me. Roslyn stared straight ahead. Valeria said I'm just a distraction. A toy. Valeria is a bitter, jealous creature who spent 100 years trying to make me love her the way I love you after 5 days. She failed. And she can't stand that a human accomplished in moments what she couldn't achieve in a century. Roslyn finally turned to look at him. His eyes were rimmed red. Could vampires cry? Apparently so. How do I know this isn't a game? How do I trust that you won't get bored? Dimitri reached into his coat and withdrew a small velvet box. He didn't open it. Just held it between them. This was my mother's ring. The only thing I kept when she died. For 200 years, I've protected it like a sacred relic. I was going to give it to you tonight. Day 7. When I asked you to stay forever. His jaw tightened. You can take it and leave. Sell it. Throw it in the ocean. I don't care. I just need you to know that this was never a game. You were never interchangeable. From the moment I saw you, you became irreplaceable." Roslyn stared at the velvet box. Her mind screamed warnings. Her heart whispered something different. "You hurt me. I know. You made me feel like I was nothing again. Just like they always did. I know. And I will spend the rest of eternity making up for it, if you let me." Roslyn took a shaky breath. "I need time. I can't just forget what I heard." Dimitri nodded, placing the box gently in her lap. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. I have an eternity, and I'll wait every second of it for you." He stood, moving toward the estate. At the garden's edge, he paused. "For what it's worth," he said without turning around, "I was wrong about so many things. But I was right about one thing. You are extraordinary, Roslyn Ashford. And whoever made you believe otherwise should answer for that crime." Then he was gone, leaving her alone with a velvet box and a decision that would shape the rest of her life. Roslyn sat in the frozen garden until the stars emerged. She opened the box once, just to look. The ring inside was ancient and beautiful, a deep red ruby surrounded by tiny diamonds that caught the moonlight like trapped stars. His mother's ring. His most precious possession. And he'd given it to her without conditions. That night, she didn't sleep. She paced her chambers, argued with herself, cried until she had no tears left. She thought about her family, who had never valued her. She thought about Dimitri, who had valued her from the first moment. Yes, his past intentions had been cold. Political. Detached. But his present actions spoke louder than any old words ever could. By dawn, she had made her decision. The great hall had been transformed. Roslyn descended the staircase to find hundreds of candles flickering in crystal holders. Flower petals, how did he keep finding flowers in winter, carpeted the marble floor. Every vampire in the estate lined the walls, watching in reverent silence. And at the center of it all stood Dimitri. He wore a formal black suit that made him look every inch the ancient king he was. But his eyes held no royal coldness. Only desperate hope. Only love. Roslyn reached the bottom of the stairs and stopped. "You did all this?" "I had to do something while waiting for you to decide my fate." Dimitri attempted a smirk but couldn't quite manage it. "I'm afraid I've been rather useless for anything else. Henrik had to stop me from pacing a hole in the floor." Roslyn held up the velvet box. "You gave me your mother's ring." "I did. You said I could leave. Sell it. Throw it away." "I did." His voice wavered. "And I meant it." Roslyn moved closer, close enough to see the slight tremor in his hands. The mighty vampire king, ruler of territories, destroyer of bloodlines, was shaking. She opened the box and removed the ring. Dimitri stopped breathing. Slowly, deliberately, Roslyn slid the ruby ring onto her own finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for her all along. "I'm not forgiving you," she said firmly. "Not yet. You have centuries of making up to do. I accept those terms entirely. And Valeria is never allowed in this estate again. Already banished from all territories I control. She'll be lucky if she finds a cave to hide in." A smile tugged at Roslyn's lips. "And you have to say it. Out loud. In front of everyone." Dimitri tilted his head, a spark of his usual humor returning. "Say what, love?" She raised an eyebrow and waited. Understanding dawned on his face. He turned to address the assembled crowd, his voice ringing through the great hall with the authority of a king who had ruled for 3 centuries. "Let it be known to every vampire, human, and creature in every territory I command. Roslyn Ashford is not a substitute. She is not a replacement. She is not a political arrangement or a contract obligation. He turned back to her, crossing the remaining distance between them, taking her hands in his. She is my choice. My only choice. My heart, my queen, and my eternal love. And anyone who suggests otherwise will discover exactly how creative I can be with punishment. I hear impalement is making a comeback. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. Roslyn shook her head, tears streaming down her face. You're impossible. Impossibly in love with you, yes. He pulled her close, one hand cradling her face with heartbreaking tenderness. Do you remember what you said that first night? He murmured. When I asked what you wanted? I said no one had ever asked me before. His forehead pressed against hers. I'm asking now. Every day for the rest of eternity, I'm asking. What do you want, Roslyn? She smiled through her tears. You. Just you. Forever. The kiss that followed shook the chandeliers. Vampires cheered. Candles flickered wildly in a phantom wind. And somewhere in the estate, Henrik was already planning the most extravagant wedding the supernatural world had ever seen. Later, much later, when the celebrations had quieted and they stood alone on their balcony watching the sunrise through enchanted glass, Dimitri wrapped his arms around Roslyn from behind. Your family will face consequences, he said softly. I cannot let their crimes go unanswered. It's not in my nature. I know. Does that frighten you? Roslyn thought about her father, who had orchestrated attacks that killed innocents. Her mother, who had erased her existence daily. Her sister, who had smiled while Roslyn was shipped off to a monster. No, she said finally. They made their choices. Now they'll live with them. Dimitri pressed a kiss to her shoulder. Remind me never to cross you. She laughed, leaning back into his embrace. Too late. You already did. And I'm spending eternity making up for it. He spun her around to face him. Starting now. What would you like for breakfast? Lunch? Dinner for the next 300 years? Name it and it's yours. Roslyn pretended to think. Surprise me. His grin turned wicked. Oh, love. You have no idea what you've just agreed to. She reached up, pulling his face down to hers. Then show me. And he did. For the rest of eternity. If you made it to the end of this story, then you and I have something in common. We both believe in love that defies expectations. Love that sees the invisible. Love that chooses the overlooked and makes them irreplaceable. Now I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. If you felt something during this story, if your heart raced when Dimitri first saw Roslyn, if you held your breath when Valeria tried to tear them apart, if you smiled when they finally chose each other forever, then you owe me one tiny favor. Subscribe. That's it. One click. 1 second of your time. I pour my heart into these stories. Late nights. Early mornings. Crafting every word to make you feel something real. And the only way I know it's working is when you hit that button and join this family. Because that's what we are here. Family. The fastest growing vampire love stories community on YouTube, and I want you to be part of it. So don't ghost me now. Not after everything we just experienced together. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read every single comment, and knowing you're out there, feeling these stories with me, that's what keeps me going. Now here's the thing. If you love this story, if Dimitri and Roslyn captured your heart, then you need to know something. The next story is even better. more emotional, more twisted. More of those moments that make you gasp out loud and clutch your chest. I'm talking about a love so forbidden it shakes the foundations of the supernatural world. A secret so devastating it changes everything. You don't want to miss it. Click the video showing on your screen right now and let me take you on another journey. I promise you won't regret it. I'll see you there.